does have health concerns. I mean, if you believe him, he's the healthiest person on earth that ever lived, and he will never die. But he does have a vein issue, which is common in older people. I can't remember exactly what it's called. And that's, the White House finally admitted this was an issue, which leads to his swollen ankles and I guess vein problems that he's been covering over with very badly colored makeup.
And I'm joined now by associate editor and columnist at the Sunday Times, Josh Glancy. Hello, Josh.
Good morning, Hugo.
How are you?
I'm all right. I'm wondering what Mark from Devon was doing in 2023.
he just had a brain freeze on Margot Robbie. It can happen.
It can happen, I guess.
Yeah, fondly remembered in the bath. And what was that? The Big Short?
That was in The Big Short. Yeah. A seminal moment.
Quite a moment in cinema. Look, let's start by going to America. Big news, Josh. Donald Trump is not dead. He's not dead. The US president yesterday addressed social media rumors that he was dead and had died over the weekend, claiming he didn't hear the frenzy of online speculation. Remind us, why did people think Donald Trump was dead?
Well, he hadn't appeared. I think really this story is indicative of just how addicted we are to the sight of Donald Trump on our television screens and on our airwaves, because a few days without him and suddenly everyone was convinced he'd killed over and died and was sort of been replaced by a body double or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think wasn't seen for about 4 or 5 days, or certainly didn't give any public addresses. He had been photographed at his golf course a couple of times. I think he is having a few minor seeming medical issues. Mm-hmm. The man is 79, and this is his second crack at the presidency. I mean, and he does subsist primarily off Big Macs and Diet Coke. So, at some point, even though he does feel invincible to a lot of people, fans and foes alike, time will catch up with him.
But that said, 3 days off in August, I had a couple of weeks. And I'm not 79.
Well, it's also that funny thing where Trump doesn't take holidays like a lot of big-time American business folk. They actually, he'll go to Mar-a-Lago for the weekend, but they don't have this European sense of, I'm taking 2 weeks off. So, fair play to the guy if he wanted a weekend.
We will come back to that in a moment. We're going to be speaking to Steve Erlanger of the New York Times. Before we do, though, Josh, closer to home, the big news story of the day is that Graham Linehan, the creator of Father Ted, has been arrested at Heathrow Airport over social media posts he made about transgender people. He was detained by 5 officers and told his arrest was over 3 posts he made on X. The Met Police says he's now been bailed pending further investigation. Speaking to Times Radio Breakfast, the Health Secretary Wes Streeting suggested the police might have gone too far.
We want to see people being kept safe by policing streets, not just policing tweets. And one thing I would say, because it's always easy for people to criticise police, the police enforce the laws of the land that we as legislators provide. So if we're not getting the balance right, then that's something that we all have to look at and consider.
While the Shadow Minister James Cleverly had this to say.
This does look like a real overreaction to what was self-evidently a joke, and people can decide whether it was a funny joke or not a funny joke, and I think he's himself said that it wasn't a great joke. But to be arrested over something like that, I think, is an overreach.
Josh, joke or not, the joke was that female-identified males in women's spaces should be punched in the testicles. We do have, laws generally that do end up sometimes, frequently, prosecuting people for advocating, even in humour, violence against other people, especially minorities. Keir Starmer it says in the Times, has told police to concentrate on tackling serious crime. So he basically seems to be very much siding with the free speech side of the argument here.
Yes, although he's doing it somewhat subtly. He's not taking the James Cleverly position. I think with these kinds of issues, it's always really important to just hold 2 truths in your head simultaneously, which sometimes we do find difficult in today's discourse. One is that what Linehan said was very obnoxious, nasty. He has a habit of doing this sort of thing. It should be, criticised. I find it reprehensible. But on the other hand, it's really, really clearly not a good use of police time, in my view, to be arresting people like that at airports. So both can be true at the same time. I agree with Starmer, I agree with Streeting that it's not a good use of police time, but also people are right to be upset by the way Linehan behaves at times.
But if we're talking about it as a free speech issue, either we have laws that say this speech like this is acceptable or it is unacceptable and should be prosecuted, or we don't. And if we do, then the police are going to enforce them. And I agree with you that it's obviously massively heavy-handed by the police. 5 policemen, it's insane. Arresting them off a plane, it's insane. But if that is the law, and it's a problem that that's the law, then the problem is the law. The problem is not the police.
Right, but the law is open to interpretation, and there is ambiguity. I read Helen Lewis wrote a column about this in The Atlantic this morning, which referenced an incident that took me back to my youth, which was my rugby captain at university, a chap called Sam, was arrested for calling a policeman's horse gay.
I remember that, yeah.
And he was very drunk at the time, and he was being an idiot. He was a 19-year-old student, and he called the policeman's horse gay, and the police arrested him, and because the policeman was really angry, and Helen pointed out that he wasn't prosecuted in the end, because how ludicrous, but the Helen pointed out that actually police very disproportionately prosecute this kind of speech against police. There is subjectivity there is ambiguity there, and there's also inconsistency. And I think what Linehan and others are pointing out is that you're seeing a lot of one side of the ledger of free speech, what you might call the sort of anti-woke side, more commonly prosecuted than the other side of the ledger. And at the end of the day, unless you can prosecute these things consistently, you're always going to end up in trouble, and therefore I think it's probably better to lean towards not prosecuting them on the whole.
Well, I think even if you do prosecute them consistently, then the free speech issue is of course very much still there. Look, Linehan's arrest has unsurprisingly caught the attention of free speech campaigners who are raising their concerns. One of those most vocal about free speech in Britain is Nigel Farage, of course, the leader of Reform UK, and he's going to be in the US today giving evidence to the House Judiciary Committee. Let's bring in now Steve Erlanger, the chief diplomatic correspondent at the New York Times. Steve, hello.
Hello.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. Is America going to notice this story, do you think?
Oh, I think it will. We have a polarized debate. We have a polarized press. We have a polarized cable network. And I'm sure certainly one side of the polarization will jump all over it. I'm waiting for the New York Post to get involved, let alone Fox News. So, the fact that Farage is in America, I think will interest them, that he's testifying, on these very issues of restrictions on free speech, which is what the hearing is about. It's Jim Jordan, who's the chairman, is concerned that restrictions on speech, hate speech, even in Britain, in Europe, with the new European Act, will harm American companies that give a lot of money to the Republican Party and Donald Trump, like Amazon and X and Meta.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, so Harry Cole writes in The Sun today that Farage wants the US to punish nations restricting free speech with diplomatic and trade penalties. And I'm sure there's plenty of people in the US who want that. J.D. Vance hinted similar. There is something quite weird about a British politician coming to the US and asking the US to punish the UK, isn't there?
Well, I think it is very weird, but I think the whole thing is also slightly weird. The issue of which you've just ventilated is a serious one, which is, what is hate speech and can you regulate it? And, what is anti-Semitic speech or anti-Islamic speech or whatever? It's not just about trans this and trans that. So I think, arrests can have a deterrent value, but they can also produce ludicrous situations that feed this polarization and the sort of media whirl. So I do think it's weird of Farage to be calling for that. Jordan had also invited Thierry Breton, a French former EU commissioner, to testify as well. Again, it's really about this European Union act to control digital space. And Breton, who's a very arrogant guy, claimed that he had never gotten the invitation. So he won't testify, but Nigel Farage will, and I'm sure it will get a lot of attention.
How well recognized a figure is Nigel Farage in the US?
Hard to say. He's been friendly, sort of, with Trump. He campaigned for Trump. I think even in the first campaign, Trump likes to take credit for Brexit somehow, but he and Vance have supported Brexit, and they've supported Nigel Farage as, quite frankly, the main character who produced it. I mean, he's been an incredibly successful British politician in the past, never even having won a seat. Now he does, of course, and he's leading a party that is doing well in the polls. So I do think, again, in this media political landscape, he's considered something of a hero by Trump and Trump followers, MAGA followers.
Steve, while I've got you, we were just talking about Donald Trump's health following those, I guess, conspiracy theories we have to talk them at the weekend that he might have secretly died. What are people thinking about Donald Trump's health? Is this becoming an issue of real concern or just kind of chattering concern?
Well, he does have health concerns. I mean, if you believe him, he's the healthiest person on earth that ever lived, and he will never die. But he does have a vein issue, which is common in older people. I can't remember exactly what it's called. And that's, the White House finally admitted this was an issue, which leads to his swollen ankles and I guess vein problems that he's been covering over with very badly colored makeup. Now he's apparently gotten better colored makeup, but he is getting kinds of treatment. And frankly, as someone, I met him in the late 80s. I mean, he's just less articulate than he used to be. He wanders more. I mean, it's not like he's not on point when he needs to be. But if you quote him verbatim, I mean, it's someone who is sometimes having trouble focusing on a particular topic and going off and telling the same stories over and over again. So you see a little bit of, age-related decline, that's for sure. But I think I think his heart's healthy. He comes from a very long-lived family also. So despite his diet, I think, to expect him to keel over soon would be a bad idea.
Do you think he minds chatter about his health? Do you think it upsets him?
I think it probably does, because he thinks of himself as a pinnacle of masculinity. He does. And he's really quite a narcissist. And I actually do believe it bothers him. Any indication that he might be getting old or might be failing at all upsets him quite a lot, which is why he goes to all the trouble with his hair. He spends an hour a day on his hair, and why he's trying to cover over anything.
In fairness, I think it would upset me too. Steve Erlanger, Chief Diplomatic Correspondent at the New York Times, thanks very much indeed for being with us.